according to a report by the Sunday Times, International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor says a special envoy will visit the United States to avert losing billions in investments. There are fears that the relations between Pretoria and Washington could sour as a result of South Africa's stance on Russia. The delegation will be meeting with various stakeholders to avoid losing or denting the current investment. The U.S. visit will be led by Deputy Minister Alvin Burtis and also the advisor in the presidency. We're now joined by Professor Anthoni Van Nieuwkerk, international relations expert. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time this afternoon. Your thought on this latest move by South Africa?
Yeah, good afternoon, Dudu. Thanks for the opportunity. I think we need to see this as another chapter in the unfolding saga of South Africa trying to recalibrate or refine its foreign relations, given that the world around us are changing by the day. So this is not unexpected to understand that the South African government, like many governments elsewhere in the world, is trying to make sense of what is happening internationally, what is happening with the global economy, and what is the best position, what is the best way to position your country to benefit maximally from new developments, but also to prevent or minimize harm as a consequence of this new world order, or disorder as some people refer to it. And I'm sure you know what I mean by that, and what our listeners and viewers understand by that. Ever since Russia went to war with NATO in Ukraine, the world has changed and is changing at a rapid rate, and more is to come. More instability is to come. And so it makes sense, for any government, including ours, to prod and make sure and test the waters to see what it is it can do to protect its own interests, but also to grasp new opportunities. And in that context, I think we have to understand that or the South African government, or civil society, or the private sector, all of us as a nation must ensure that those that we trade with and those that we have strong relations with, we need to keep that in balance. That would include, China, the BRICS countries, but also the EU and the individual countries of the EU, and then, of course, North America. These are all important trading and political partners, and cultural partners, if you want. And the challenge is for our foreign ministry to find that optimal balance.
Speaking of that balance, the report by the Sunday Times notes that the International Relations Minister said the special envoy will be sent to the U.S. to engage and persuade various stakeholders on South Africa's stance to squash any future negative implications on the country's trade ties with the North American giant. What is the threat, or maybe the consequence, should then America decide, well, we don't want to play with you anymore?
Yeah, some say that it's a real threat. There are elements in the American political establishment, not necessarily in the Biden administration, but in their parliament, who are very keen to ensure that those that they do business with, those that America does business with, must work with them against Russia in this war in the Ukraine, and if they don't throw their weight in behind NATO or behind America, then there's some form of sanction or punishment or consequence that will come. And so there is a very vocal minority on the Republican side who says that South Africa is putting its faith in Russia and in the BRICS alliance, yet they want to trade with us and do business with us. We have to teach them a lesson if they don't choose. This is us, if we don't choose wisely. And so there is a threat to sanction our trade relations or harm our trade relations. And in particular, there's the special trading agreement that we have with the Americans, AGOA. It's a Growth and Opportunity Act. It's a beneficial relationship whereby we export what we make to or grow or produce or take out of the ground. It goes to America, and they slap less tariffs on those exports than they would otherwise have done. So it's a privileged relationship. And some of the Americans say, we're going to take those privileges away if you choose to befriend Russia or China or the BRICS alliance. And that's a really difficult position to be in. It's a conundrum, and I understand why the president is sending envoys. Although I must say in a footnote to do that, we have embassies and ambassadors and a diplomatic service that needs to do this work in America and elsewhere. But maybe it's just adding a bit of muscle to the attempt to make sure that we don't disturb those trade relations. But I want to say quickly, I don't know if you have more time, but things are moving so fast that we don't know. We have a BRICS summit later this year. And one of the big purposes of this summit, leaving Putin behind for the minute, is to find out how we can strengthen our trading partnerships with the BRIC alliance countries. And so we want to trade, I think, in a balanced way. We want to trade with the West and the East. But within a year, there'll be an election in South Africa, and there might be a new coalition with a new foreign policy outlook. Or Trump or Trumpism might, come back to America with a vengeance in a year from now. And that will throw up all sorts of new challenges in terms of foreign policy. So I must say it's a moving target. It's very difficult to maintain momentum under these conditions.
Okay. I'd like for us to continue with that theme and leave Putin behind. We've spoken about the threats. What opportunities are there? So you mentioned other countries, the likes of China. You mentioned the BRICS partners. You've got countries on the continent which are saying, well, we'd like to sign up to be part of BRICS as well. The African Continental Free Trade Area. If that works, Doc, and it doesn't remain a dream, how important is that, especially when you speak of AGOA, right? Because how's that going for us? How are we benefiting, right? And so if AFTA is indeed a dream realized, today it's Russia and Ukraine. Tomorrow it's somebody else. And so we also be expected to take a position on that. And if you don't like it, you'll be wrapped over the knuckles. But what opportunity does this present for Africa to actually put itself on its own stage, create its own stage?
Yeah. Now, I think you put your finger on the pulse, indeed. And it's one of the focus areas of the upcoming BRICS summit. But it should be the number one agenda item on the African Union, on SADC, the regional organizations, and so on, is to answer this question: how can we speed up free trade in Africa so that all of us in Africa benefit from what we make, what we export, what we import, instead of the trading pattern that's happening now globally is we export our raw minerals, the stuff that comes out of the ground. We all know the story of coal, but it is also, rare minerals that are needed in this new technology, smartphones and so on. It goes out of Central Africa and Southern Africa, and it goes east and west. We import the finished products back. So it's a decades-old dream to actually realize that Africa can cohere as one trading bloc. That is the challenge. It's probably President Ramaphosa's number one or number two challenge in terms of Africa policy, is to promote this. It's very difficult. It's very difficult because you get easy dollars very quickly if you export these. By the way, I think we've seen the Al Jazeera expose of how gold is exported illegally from Zimbabwe into Dubai and elsewhere in the Middle East, and how that distorts, relationships. That is how wrong it can go. The same with the DRC, which is a member of SADC. We're also a member of SADC. And the challenge is, how do we work together, and how do we provide leadership to make sure that we can trade with dignity and with authority amongst ourselves, and put up a very strong front when it comes to global trade relations. It's an everlasting challenge, and I must say, we're always at the receiving end, whether it's the European Union or North America or the Chinese. And that, I must say, if I can be critical for a second, we really need to build more capacity, Dudu, in terms of economists, trade negotiators, and very sophisticated diplomats who can take this challenge on. Because we don't want to be in a position where the Americans say, if you make the wrong political choice, we're going to take away our trading relationships, or we're going to sanction or punish you. We need to find a strong front to prevent this from happening in the short term, which is the next couple of months, but also in the longer term, in terms of our own national development plans, where we want to be in 2030 or even later. So how do we benefit from the Chinese relationship? Of course, China is rising, but also we don't throw away the Europeans or the Americans. That, I think, sits at the heart of our emerging foreign policy.
Yeah, because we are not an island either, Prof. So maybe in just closing up the conversation, our international relations minister has always made it known that, if you want to speak about international law, what's good for the goose must also be good for the gander. You condemn what Russia is doing to Ukraine. She cited recently, or not even recently, but what's been happening between Palestine and Israel and the silence around that. And so when you take a look at international relations and this new world order that you speak of, where do you perceive, or what do you perceive the future of diplomacy is?
Yeah, I mean, this is delicate terrain to traverse because, I think Minister Pandor is correct. There's the hypocrisy of the West. And in that sense, if you're a bit more cynical, the ICC is being used, as a political tool. No consequences if a big nation invades Afghanistan, Iraq, assassinate Muammar Gaddafi, create chaos in Yemen or in Syria. But when it comes to some of our own, then we have to quickly, appear in front of a court of judges in The Hague, in Europe. So she makes the point that the challenge is what we do about that. And there, I think, lies a debate. Do we persist with membership of the ICC and try and reform it from within to bring a better balance? Or do we actually, as Africans, say that when the ICC come and complain about all the African dictators and those who abuse human rights, why don't we have an ICC that is African-made, that is homegrown, that can do the job from Addis, from the AU headquarters? And we failed so far in doing exactly that. So we can't criticize the ICC too much because here in our own backyard, we need to have the legal institutional arrangements in place to make sure that we do what we preach others have to do. Yeah. So we can't run away from some of these international conventions. We have to participate in the politics of the United Nations. We want to be at the Security Council, although we won't get a seat very soon, I think. Maybe our children will see the day. But we have to understand and negotiate Africa's place in a very turbulent world order. Because, Dudu, if we don't do this, if we don't try to do this, others will do it for us, and they will tell us which way to fly. And that might not be in our own interest.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your time this afternoon.